you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, Leah, for the presentation. It was super insightful. So my name is IHan. I've been interested in social impact for years. I've been lucky enough to participate a few projects. So today I would like to share with you some of learnings and stories from the field. Around 11 years ago, I saw a case study by Frog, a design consultancy. It's called Project M. So it's a self-test kit for HIV for South African market. The first time I saw the project, I was so inspired. I have goosebumps over my body. And I was a motion designer then, and I told myself, I don't know how, but one day I'm going to join Frog, and I want to design to help people. So a couple years later, I was finally be able to join Frog, and I told my colleagues the reason I want to join Frog because I want to design, I want to help people. And they told me, yes, that's great. It's good to you want to help, but first you should really learn to find the right problem to solve. So they told me about a story. In 2009, US military has an initiative in Afghanistan. So they want to build good relationship with the local women to earn their goodwill. So they send out a small team around the country and try to figure out how we can best support local women. One of the team, they found out the village that they visit, the women spend more than an hour a day just for fetching water. So they say, great, we can help them. So they built a well inside the village to save time. A few months later, they went back the village and realized the well was destroyed. It was destroyed by the women in the village. It turns out, yes, it takes a long time to fetch water, but that was the only time they have an excuse to leave home and connect with each other, share stories. So by saving time, they took away the best hour of the day. So this mentality of I want to help, like this urge to help, made us jump to conclusion too quickly without fully understand the problem space. And so this motivated me to learn about design research because I want to learn how to listen, to understand first before rushing for a conclusion. So when I started learning design research, I was lucky enough, young Chip Chase, and some of you might know, he was leading the design research practice in Shanghai. One of the things I learned from him is how important the team dynamics and self-care is when you're in the field. Why? Because when you're in the field, we will usually stay in a place for 5 to 10 weeks. You don't get to go home in between because of budget and long flight, all that stuff. And you're with your team 24/7. And sometimes you research on quite heavy subjects. So you get mini burnout from the field. And since our work is all about interacting with people, if you are not in a good mental and physical healthy state, it really affects how you interview your participants, how you interpret the research results. So self-care shouldn't be an afterthought. That's part of your job to stay productive. One of the thing we told our team member to do is you bring a little something to bring you personal comfort. So kind of help you, cheer you up when you're feeling down. So in this suitcase is my suitcase. Underneath all the equipment, there's 2 packs of instant noodle because that remind me of childhood. But of course, those are just temporary fix. If you are interested in long-term self-care for as a UX designer or researcher, Vivian has a nice post, series of blogs that I encourage you to check out. When you're in foreign country and encounter different value system, different perspective, sometimes you might find yourself being judgmental. I know I am, but that's okay. As long as you're mindful, aware of it, I would suggest to maybe take a break, park that story aside and come back to it later. And if you are able to look at it from a different angle, that might give you a different perspective. when we're in Malawi, we're designing an agriculture tip product. So one day we're interviewing a father, and he's saying, yeah, agriculture information will be useful, but it's too expensive. I can't afford it. And then as we're trying to understand his mobile usage, we found out he was subscribing to football news, and that costs more than agriculture information. My first reaction is like, oh man, this is such a stereotypical man, because we heard so many stories about men usually spend money on themselves versus women will spend on household. So I was like, but I know I'm being judgmental, so we parked our story on the side, and then we continue with our research. A couple days later, when we look back at this story, we realized actually football news bring him happiness, bring him joy. And who are we there to say he doesn't deserve that, right? However, this makes us think about when we are thinking about our agriculture products, we're focused so much on the education side. So we're focused on being precise, informative, easy to understand. But this story pushing us to think, can agriculture information as fun as football news? Can we make it engaging, relatable, and memorable? So this service is a voice message service. So before we have just a person reading a paragraph of that information, and this pushes us to think about, can we make it more like a dialogue, like a two farmers talking to each other? And our content partner did a good job of experimenting with different formats, so it's engaging but still stay credible, so people will take that information seriously. And then the next year when we went back to reevaluate the service, we heard people tell us they subscribe to the service not just because it's useful, but also because it's fun. And because of that dialogue format, actually made the information easier to absorb. When planning a research in a foreign country, for me, the most important thing is to your local team, because they don't just translate language, they also translate culture and bring you that nuances that help you to get up to speed faster. When we're in Malawi, I noticed that our participant usually gets super tired after 2 hours. So we're thinking maybe we can take a little tea break in between. So I was saying maybe we can bring chocolate, bring cookies, so we can have a little snack break. And my wonderful guy, Chilua, telling me, chocolate? No, bring Obama. And I was like, Obama? What is Obama? So this is Obama, the big bun. People love it because they can share it with their friends and family. So this story then inspired me to learn more about Malawians' unique sense of humor. They like to name the food after celebrities. So they have a bun called Bin Laden. When we're in a country, the Trump bread is trending. So, so having a good local team, they save me from countless faux pas, but also just bring so much rich color into your research. Incentive is something that you don't really think much if you do research in Canada. For example, gift card or cash, like the debit card, is straightforward enough. But in some setting, you need to be aware of it. Because in the village, when we visit a participant, all the neighbor will come and they know. So if they see you hand out cash, they might bring inconveniences to the participant. Maybe the neighbor will want to borrow it, or someone might try to steal it. You just don't know. One of our team in Bangladesh, their participants' cattle was stolen the night after they visit. We still don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but this is something you want to be mindful of and discuss with your local team. What's an appropriate token for your appreciation rather than cash. One thing about planning for research is you can plan as much as you want, knowing that everything won't go as your plan. So you always want to be flexible and ready to improvise. when we're in Ghana, because there are a lot of scam story surrounding around the country, so people are more skeptical about strangers. We get a lot of cancellation, and one day we had 3 cancellation in a row, even after we've been driving for 2 hours just to meet them. So I was quite frustrated, and we are just wandering around trying to figure out what to do next. And when we passed by a hair salon, I realized, well, actually, we want to interview young pregnant women, and hair salon is perfect because when they're doing their hair, they cannot go anywhere. They lock down. So then we find the hair salon, and the customer happened to be pregnant, and we offered to pay for her braid, and we had a really nice 2-hour conversation. So when things fall apart, don't panic, don't be discouraged. This might be a good opportunity to just improvise, and then it might bring you surprisingly good results. One of the things that I find challenging in doing research in foreign setting is they sometimes feel intimidated by us, or they might feel shy. They're afraid they say something wrong, offend us. And so there are a few different ways that you can try to get around it. And for example, in Indonesia, there's many, many different ways of saying no without saying no. So sometimes you don't, when the participants say, yes, they like the product, I don't know if they are really like it or they're being polite. And one of the ways you can try is to reframe the question, take the spotlight off the participant. So instead of asking how useful this product is to you, then you are putting the pressure on the person. You can ask them, who is this product most useful for? So it's more general. It's almost you make it less personal so they don't feel that pressure. But of course, this kind of question, you want to work with your local team. You might need to experiment different ways to asking questions to find the right balance, and so you can get the answer that you need. The other thing I like to do is do activities, because it's a good change from just talking. Like just talking for 2 hours is really, really tiring and kind of boring too. So you can do activities with the participant. And when you're doing activities, you are talking about it. You are talking about the activity itself. So that's the same thing. They feel less pressure on them to make sure, so they don't feel they have to say something to please you. And also, really good way to ask them just to show you when they say certain thing, to show you how they do it or where they do it. When we're in Laos, at that time we were doing a research around the people's mentality towards card payment. So we're in this restaurant, and the restaurant owner say, oh yeah, card payment is the future. I really wish my customer will pay with card more because it's safer, it's more efficient. So when we went to the cashier, I asked to see the POS machine, like where you can pay with card. And so the cashier said, okay. So he went down to the cabinet deep inside and take out this bag. And inside is the POS machine. Why in there? Because more than half the time, the network doesn't work. And they're afraid the POS machine will get dusty, then it's get broken, then it's gonna cost a lot of money to fix it. So in the end, they just put it aside. And by asking them to show us where the POS machine is, we learned that it's not just about cash versus card payment. There's this whole distrust and intimidation around technology that we need to take into consideration. When it's appropriate, I will also ask the participant to teach me something, because this gives them a sense of feeling that, oh, actually, this whole interview thing is not so difficult. It's something I can do, and I can teach you. And also, you do activity together, have a good laugh, that make them more relaxed. You can see the person is not impressed by my sima making skill. It's like, so, like, what we're trying to do is we want to make them relax as much as possible before we starting the conversation, so they feel more open to share their thoughts. Another thing I like to do is to bring prototypes because I feel I can get more tangible answer when they have something to play with. But there's also some biases might come with the form of the prototype. So in this example, I made a paper phone. So we are testing out a text message flow. So I asked the participant after they read the message, what would you do next? And he looked super confused and lost. And he's like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. And I was like, oh my God, this message must be horrible that he's like feeling so lost. So I was asking, what's wrong? What happened? He said, I want to reply to this message, but I don't know where the reply button is because this is not my phone. And so realize, okay, the message itself is fine, but it's the prototype, the form is not good. So he was lost not because of the message itself, but just because the prototype, the button wasn't clear. So knowing that next year when we go back for a different service, our tech team built us a 3D printed phone with an Arduino board inside, so we can make it more interactive. People can play with it. So we're testing a voice menu structured navigation. So after people play with the current system and then the new one, and they say, oh, the new one's so much better. It's so much clearer. It's much easier to use. So I ask, what makes it clearer? I say, oh, the voice is louder. I can hear clearer because the 3D printed phone is connected to a speaker. And I'm like, okay. Again, it doesn't mean the new structure is better just because the prototype form is creating that biases. But of course, knowing this, then we are able to adjust how we test for the next round. When we do research, we tend to focus on individual, but for community is super, super important, especially for underserved community. When we are in Rwanda, we are testing, we're designing a product for mobile banking product. And we know that there are a lot of informal saving groups around the country because banks are not accessible. So they will gather around. They usually have a little booklet like that to write who has contributed money, who hasn't. And there's money there, usually put it in the wooden box. So it's not super efficient and it's not super safe either. So in the beginning, we're thinking maybe our product can replace the saving group and help people save. As we talk to more and more saving groups, we realize the saving groups, saving is just a small part of it, but there's a lot of human connection that is happening within the group. So you have women saving group, when they are gathered together, yes, they contribute money, but they also talk about domestic violence or how to handle when your husband has a girlfriend outside. There's also farmers group that they will help each other harvest so they can make sure that they have good yield and also the right time to sell to the market. All these things are not replaceable by digital product, and we also don't want to replace that either. Instead, for us to think is how can our product to support those groups, so take away the administrative part of it, make the cash collection quicker, safer, but we want to keep that human connection within the group. Next, I want to tell you a story about Alex. In 2016, we are in Malawi we want to evaluate an existing mobile health product. So we want to interview existing user, but our partner at that time, they don't have complete customer profile. So all we have is a spreadsheet with cell phone towers and the number that call the service. So our local team spent a few days calling one by one, screening them, and find the right person who is willing to let us interview. And so we found Alex. And so we try to schedule an interview with him. And usually, because in the village you don't have address, so when you set up an interview, you will say, okay, you come to the town center in the afternoon, and I'll bring you to my house. So we went the day before to visit the village chief, because you don't just walk into a village and interview people. You need to visit the local authority first, tell them why they are there, show your respect before you meeting people. So we went the day before, we talked to the chief, and then we told him we want to meet with Alex. And he said, okay, yes, there's an Alex in our town, but with a different last name. And we're like, okay. And then we tried to call our Alex, but his phone was down or something, we just couldn't reach him. So anyway, the chief said, okay, anyway, you come back tomorrow, I'll bring you an Alex, and you see if that's the person you're looking for. So we went back the next day, he bring their Alex, it's not our Alex, and I'm like, okay. And we're still trying to call our Alex, and finally we reached him, and he gave us the exact name of his village. So we asked the chief of the village, and he said, oh, okay, he's in the neighborhood village. It's not far, just drive that way, and when you see a mountain, his village is at the bottom of the mountain, and you will find him. So we drive for 2.5 hours, and we see no mountain. And along the way, we just stopping by asking people, where is that village? Everybody told us, just drive that way. You're almost there. It's not far. Just drive that way. Keep driving. So, at one point, the road disappeared. We're driving on the grassland, and there's still no mountain. But anyway, after 3 hours, we see the mountain. I was like, great, there's a mountain, and there's a village. And we went to the village, and great, people know about our Alex. So they took us to meet him. So this is Alex. He's 24. His wife, Ethel, was 19, and their baby was 5 months old at that time, baby girl. As we are settling down for the interview, people start getting around. People are curious why there are visitors here, and we become the entertainment center. And as you can see, this is not super ideal for conducting interview, talk about your personal health. So this is when you want to put your whole team to work. For the kids, they are easier, so you can ask them to leave and then come back later, no problem. But for adults, it's more, you need to be more careful. You cannot ask them to leave because that will make them feel unwelcome, and they might feel offended, and that will make Alex look bad. You put him in the awkward position. So our driver at that time, he works for another NGO. So we said, okay, you take the men to the side, tell them about your NGO, and there is some soda in the car, share with them, distract them as long as you can. So we're down to a more manageable size. So Alex told us he really appreciates the service because they live in the rural village. There's no health worker in the village. When his wife was pregnant, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to make her stay healthy, how to have a healthy pregnancy. So he used the service a lot. In fact, he's the only person who can easily give you 10 food that is rich in vitamin A without any hesitation. He really takes those information into heart. He also told us that he tried very hard to buy an egg a day for his wife so she will have enough nutrition. When their baby was born, the national average was 2.5 kilo, but their baby was born with 3.2 kilo. So he's very proud of that. We also did some exercise with him, try to understand what's important to him. So this exercise, we gave him 10 coins, and there's cards that have each one is the things that he can buy. So we want to know how would he spend those 10 coins. This kind of exercise is not to take the result literally. It's just a way for us to understand what's important to him. For example, the first thing he put down was to donate to church. So you want to understand why church is so important and how does church play a role when he's in his decision making. So this exercise help us to understand how our product fit into his life. So after the research, because we were interview him at his front porch, so we asked for a house tour, like can he show us around his house? That's when we realized that wasn't his house. He was a bit embarrassed about where he lived, so he borrowed a neighbor's house for us to interview him. And this is where he lives. So seeing that, it just gives us a lot more context when he said he tried hard to buy an egg a day, how much effort he has put into, but also how proud he must feel be able to raise healthy baby all by themselves. So finally, I want to leave you with a quote from Chimamanda. In her talk, The Danger of Single Story, she said that the single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. And that's how I feel about the underserved groups. The only story we hear about them is all about poverty, the daily struggle, the hardship, and we rarely hear about their ambition, their dream, their pride, their joy. And as design researcher, we are privileged to be able to discover different stories of our participant, and I think that comes with an obligation to make sure their stories are told, their voice are heard, and for whatever product or service we do, we'll have their best interests in the core. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you.
Questions? I'm going to come around with the mic.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. It was absolutely insightful. I was thinking about participatory design as a concept, and I could see that you did amazing work with Frog, going to different countries and really getting the insights and talking to the locals. But I was thinking of the process that you were going through with your team to design the products or the services. And I was thinking of your definition of what participatory design is, and how would you, where would you put your design research, in which part of the phases of the process would you consider they fell into, I would say? So was it at the beginning, the end, the middle that you were talking to people? And what was the limitation of the research that you were doing in those countries? And how did you consider that in the process of building?
So what we do is, actually the design research part should happen in the whole process, but depending on when the client reach Frog, which phase they're in. So sometimes when they're, for example, if it's a new service, they want to enter a new country, we will do a bit more foundational research, so like about the mentality about certain product, and this might a bit more broad. And if they already have product, we might test certain product idea, but we wouldn't make it so concrete. So that's because then we still want space to tweak the product. When the product is already launched or being developed, that we will do a bit more, say, co-creation. And this one will then less about foundational understanding, but more focus on the product area. And this one, that's where a lot of like prototype and then the car sorting, all that will happen. And in the end, if the product has launched, then we will do kind of mix, like understanding the current user, but also trying to interview like the new user, understand the barrier. So like in different phase, there's different method. And I would say like the trend when, say my first project in 2012 when we're in Rwanda, at that time, clients are more willing to spend more budget to do deeper research. And then later on, what I see in the project is then client wants some quick fix. But everybody's talking about quick and easy fixes and stuff. And then the budget start to be more short, and then they are looking for something a bit more concrete. And so that kind of also changed the way we have to do the research. So does it answer your question?
Yes, in some ways, but I was also, I wanted to learn from you, like what do you consider participatory? And if the work you were doing was it participatory? And would you think that it was?
So all the research we have has that flavor to it. It's like we always want the participant to kind of design something with us and then participate in that process. It's just more when you're in the earlier stage, you don't take that result that literally, because at that time you are still exploring a broad concept, and then versus later, then you started getting more on the feature level kind of exercise. Yeah.
That's all.
It's okay.
So awkward. Okay. So first, thank you for your presentation. My question, you had briefly mentioned it at the beginning. You said that you were a motion designer, and I wanted to know what was the transition for you to become a UX researcher? Like what path did you take? And what?
So it was kind of lucky in a way that, so when I started, motion design for interface wasn't a thing yet. At that time, the UX or interaction design is very focused on the like a static screen, and so very like I think the UX designer that at that time they don't learn about motion yet, and so but Frog was thinking about motion as part of the experience, so they're looking for people who can do motion but also have basic understanding about interaction. And so I was able to kind of join Frog as a motion/interaction design. So I started doing motion for interfaces, and through project I learned about like interaction design, and then learn about research through project, and of course like reading books and working with people, learn from them. And it's lucky because I think my first freelance project with Frog, they had a motion designer before, but then he had an accident. So they need someone really quickly, and then that was me. So. But he was okay, The person was okay afterwards. So.
Would you have like any advice of like a path to take for someone that wants to change careers to go more into UX design, like nowadays?
I think there are a lot of resources online, and I think for people want to transition, one of the problem is lack of portfolio. It's like you don't have actual portfolio, right? And so I would suggest there are sites like Catch a Fire. It's a volunteer platform that connect the nonprofits with volunteer, and you can volunteer your skill. So you can, there are people looking for building a website and all that. So you can use that to build your portfolio, but also having a good cause, something like that. And like books and coming to event like that, you'll be able to meet people.
Thank you. Thanks. Any other questions? Last call. I think we're good. Oh. Where? Oh, I shouldn't have picked it up.
Hi, I was just wondering, when I was looking at the video of your client or customer, participant, when he was choosing what to pay for,
Yeah.
and I noticed that the cell phone was way up in the corner. I was wondering if there's a story behind that.
Oh yeah, that's because this is a second round. So the first round, he put all his money on the cell phone because he has one and it's super important. He wanna buy another one for his wife, and then so we're like, okay, we know this is important, but we also want to know other things. So we put on a side, say, okay, let's say you already have that, and yeah, so like interesting about the exercise is sometimes they might misunderstood how it works, but through that conversation you kind of understand what they do. Yeah, and you also see that he actually put down on the football news again, another person, right? But then he pick it back and put it on the school fees, and so kind of know that he feel he should contribute to school fees, but the baby are still young, right? So there's this like hesitation, and that's really interesting for us to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In reality, he might spend more on football.
Yeah, it might. And I think another exercise, a similar one, we kind of change it when different people. And one thing that was quite interesting was when you give 10 coins, it's like a smaller amount. People will tend to spend things on more household product. And when we give, say, you have 50 coins, then people will think about maybe I'll buy a motorcycle so I can start a new business. It's the gap for them to reach their dream suddenly become closer. They're more willing to keep the whole chunk into something might give them long-term benefit. And so that's also another thing that was like, oh, that's interesting for us to understand.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thanks.
Sorry, I always pick the wrong side. Any other questions before we wrap up? Yep.
So you were saying after you used the paper to do the first prototype that there was an issue with that, and you went back with a 3D printed phone with Arduino in it. And I'm also just wondering from the design perspective, when you're doing the more basic prototypes, how much design goes into that, and why did you go with the 3D printed phone? Like infographics, even between cultures change. So do you have a designer doing that? Do you just kind of throw something together? Was it English underneath? Do you have it in multiple languages? Just whatever's quickest?
So it depends. For the paper one, it's because it's a Nokia phone, and we would like to. So earlier in their earlier version, the Nokia phone actually takes action scripts. I don't know if you know, you're kind of old like me, but so our first actually in our earlier research with Nokia phone, we were able to like kind of build something a bit more interactive. But then when we do the research that time, they took out that function. They no longer read action scripts, and then the reason why we could have just sent a message to the person's phone, right? The reason why we don't do it is because it's agriculture information, and the message itself hasn't been validated by experts. And you don't want to send something could have a danger of misinterpretation into participants' phone, because then you're sending wrong information. So that's why we then decide to have a paper phone to do that test. And the Arduino phone, 3D printed phone, that was it was kind of talking to the tech team, or I was saying about, oh, my paper phone last time doesn't work, and they were like, why don't we just build you something? And I was like, okay, great. And then they put it together very quickly, and it's also the first time we're testing out, and it works out great because we want to test the voice menu, and that will be really difficult to test with something still because you need to go through that navigation. And you mentioned that infographic is super interesting because people's ability to read icons is very different. Is the ability to read simplified graphics is a trained skill. And so actually you see the card that I have another version. I download super nice icons and all that and realize actually people don't understand that. They rely on the text because it's too simplified, they don't really understand. And I only noticed that when I see my guide we have a worksheet, and then through an interview, they need to draw like a smiley face or sad face. And it took my local guide like 30 seconds to draw a smiley face. And I asked her, do you understand what this is? She's like, no. And then I was like, oh, all my effort of making beautiful icons, it doesn't really matter. And so this is another thing that we take things for granted. And then that's why when you look at a lot of the local app, and they tend to use photo or super realistic illustration, and just to reduce that misunderstanding. But now with WhatsApp, it's very popular, so like emoji and all that, and that changed. Like people now are more familiar with all that icons.
Any other questions? Looks like we're good.